coming up on
People come
Unleash the
together
Self.
to celebrate certain cycles of life, or um, certain rites of passage, or they celebrate the sun or they celebrate the moon, right? Like, and it's a community gathering where they drink the medicine too. um, but at the same time, that very same place, that very same fire, it carries the container for the vision questers who sit alone on the mountain with themselves and their thoughts and nothing but the clothes on their back. No food, no water, no talking, no touching.
Welcome to Unleash the Self, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I'm your host, Konstantin Morun, and today we welcome Masha. Actually, Masha and I met more than 2 years ago now during a journey in Ecuador. We both participated in some local cuisine, as you may say. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Masha is a vision quester from the altar of, and I already forgot how to pronounce this, Masha, so you're going to help me out.
Jurek Pamba.
There we go, Pamba, astrologer and an experienced psychonaut. Now, for the past decade, she has studied religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Christianity to unlock the mystical in the mundane. How awesome is that? Now, her studies have led her to understand the key principle of human faith, which rests on the three pillars of Gnosis that enable us to find tools and practices to heal a very existential fear in the world today. Man, so many questions already, Masha. I'll get to those in a second. Masha helps psychonauts and people who have had mystical experiences that struggle with reclaiming their power or feel lost or confused about their experiences by illuminating their karma and teaching them the spiritual tools they can use to restore their faith and get clear on next steps in their lives. So, Masha, welcome.
Thank you. Very excited to be here with you to talk with you.
So many questions already. I know, I mean, again, you and I met, 2.5 years ago. That was a magical time. And I guess, I mean, some of our audience members will know that the reason I'm even sitting here in front of you and in front of them is because of the beautiful time in Ecuador, which was my spiritual awakening, or the beginning of it, I should say. It's still ongoing. And I'm curious for you, like, if you think back to that time as much as you remember, because I know you've been on so many paths since then, what comes up as, like, one thing that stood out to you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will always remember that time as the time that I learned how to love myself again. And it was so transformational for me. Sitting in ceremony, drinking the ayahuasca, the San Pedro, and seeing what has always already been in front of me, but seeing it with new eyes, like so many
Yes.
of us were like stuck in our heads and worried about very mundane things and lose the magic and awe and inspiration in our lives because it's so easy to get trapped in the doldrums of daily life, and at some point we kind of forget our inner child. We forget how to learn to love ourselves again in the new shapes, forms, and stages of our lives that we go through. And one of the biggest things that enabled me to understand this is the structure of the ceremonies, how each stage, each portal, each door of the ceremony represents different stages of your life. It starts with
Mhm.
and then teenagehood, then adulthood, and then elderhood. And each of those stages are honored, and each of them represent different aspects of our humanity: humility, willingness, power, and gratitude. And how simple these concepts are, it boggles the mind that healing doesn't have to be complicated, And so many of us are constantly searching and searching externally for things, but in reality, we have it inside of us. And it's just a matter of wiping the lens clean a little bit so that we can start to see the magic in all things again.
Yeah. How beautiful is that? And I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, one thing I've learned on my path is that we all have a very unique gift, the one to be able to heal ourselves, to truly accept all the gifts and powers of the soul. And yes, so few of us actually are aware of it, and even fewer actually are able to tap into it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people give away their power like that, because along with the idea of like externalizing your search for happiness, externalizing your search for healing is, and I saw this in Ecuador too, actually, is people putting the shamans on a pedestal. And
Yeah.
actually, after the Sweat Lodge night, I don't know you. I don't think you were part of the Sweat Lodge.
Oh,
You were
I
the
did.
sixth.
I
Oh,
did
you
all of it.
okay?
I did it
Okay.
all.
I'm sorry. I don't remember if you were 6 days or 12. um, but the Sweat Lodge part, after we were sitting outside, and I went over to Antai and I asked him if I could share some tobacco with him. And so he rolled a little cigarette, and we were sitting there and talking, and I was uh, kind of in awe of him because he seemed so powerful to me. And then he turns to look at me and he tells me, "Masha, I'm human." you know, I I don't even consider myself a shaman. I make mistakes. I have my flaws, and it really put into perspective for me, how I and other people put gurus, spiritual leaders, healers up on this pedestal. Like, you have the answers for me. I worked on a psychic hotline for a little while, and these people call and they're like, "You have the answer to all of my problems." And it's like, mm, I might be able to illuminate something for you that you didn't think about before, but I'm not solving your problems. Ultimately, you have the responsibility of doing that. You have to take radical responsibility for your actions. You have to call back your power and say no when something is not working for you. You have to call back your power and say, "This isn't how I want to live my life." And you have to make a decision for the betterment of yourself. And if you don't do that, then you're shit out of luck. Like, hope I can swear. I
You can do whatever you want.
Because honestly, that's the other thing about ceremony that really touched me. And with all of the prayers, the tobacco prayers during the rounds, they always talk about power, especially during the round of power, taking back your power. It seems like such a ephemeral concept, but when you start contextualizing it within your life, it's like, okay, well, attachment, for example, when you're attaching yourself to somebody, you're asking for their validation, you're asking them to confirm the value of your existence. And that's one way of externalizing your power. Or it can be looking up to a guru and expecting that guru to be the miracle holder for the rest of your life, or else, nothing good will come. Or externalizing your power by not putting in boundaries that you need to make with people who are taking advantage of you. There's so many different ways that we give away our power. And so when they talk about power, the primary thing they always hit on is radical self-responsibility, and saying, I am the creator of my dream. I am the person who makes things happen for myself in my life. The only person I can truly 100% rely on is me, because only I know
Yeah.
what my internal dialogue is, how I view the world, what I want, what I truly desire. And when we start to become more honest with ourselves about that, when we start to recognize that we don't need to play into the narratives of the monkey mind that tell us that we're not worth it, that we don't deserve it, that whatever limiting belief narrative, like, as soon as we start to reframe those things, as soon as we start to believe in something more, and it doesn't even have to be a higher power, like, it can be anything. um as soon as we start to believe in something more, that magic can happen if you just believe in it, then we start to take self responsibility for our choices in our lives.
I love that, right? Because I mean, you said so many beautiful things there that I agree with, and something that reminds me of how easy it is for us to give our power away. And I mean, I used to do that a lot before I had my awakening, and even after. I mean, even today, there's many times when I, despite knowing all of this, you still do it unconsciously because of the programs, because of the stories of your life. And what I found on my path is it's not about perfection, but it's about, okay, learning from what happened, reminding yourself, and trusting the path. And my guide said very beautiful. It's like the only person standing in the way of you getting what you want is you. There's no one else.
Yeah.
And that's both empowering and disempowering in a way, right? It's obviously very empowering because you're like, oh, that means that no one else has control over my life. Cool. Disempowering because you're like, oh, wait a second. It's also me. And I've been doing this all my life anyway. But and for me, it's just 100% empowering. And when I remind myself, it's like, how am I standing in my way right now? Like, what am I not allowing? How am I going against the flow? And that all came as a result of our time in Ecuador. Now, that was the catalyst. Of course, there was a lot of work that had to happen after. And it sounds like you've been on a beautiful journey. I mean, before, but also after. And you've done quite a bit of studying on your own and dove deeper into more of these practices and medicines and whatnot. But let's jump to the pillars of Gnosis, because I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds cool. So I'd like to learn and see what comes up. So tell us more.
Yeah. Um, well, I wanted to speak to your point first about
Yeah, of
the
course.
disempowering because it is really freaking scary to be the one like taking like girding your loins and picking yourself up and like actually standing in your integrity like it and saying doing what you say and saying what you mean and being authentic. It's the scariest possible version of vulnerability that there is because that's how our limiting beliefs are created, is that when we were vulnerable like that in the past, somebody hurt us, and then we created walls and shields and ways to cope with that
Mm,
pain. And then when we return back to it, it's almost like you have a newfound awareness, and now it's your responsibility to cultivate that awareness and to maintain it, because as soon as you're aware, when you're being self-destructive.
yeah,
And you know what's best for you. And if you don't do what's best for you, you're just sending yourself almost on purpose into a path of suffering. So that's another thing about responsibility. I just wanted to like
I
put a
love that
little
actually. You're right. I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't add anything else there. Absolutely spot on.
yeah. But the three pillars of Gnosis. So in my studies, I've been studying a lot of religions over time because when I was in my deepest, darkest depression, I didn't know where to turn. Like, I was going to therapy, I had all sorts of antidepressants. I think I went through maybe 4 or 5 different antidepressants. And I was also, at some point, I ended up in the inpatient unit because I had like a little psychotic break where I wasn't
Mhm.
sleeping for 4 days straight. And the only thing that really stayed consistent for me were these spiritual texts because they somehow illuminated and helped me understand why I was suffering more than anything else. Like talk therapy and modern psychology has its benefit because it teaches you coping skills and tools that you can use to at least maintain a baseline, but it doesn't get to the root of the problem.
Yes.
And it doesn't get to the core, which I've discovered is a crisis of faith. At least it was for me. It was a crisis of faith. I was looking at all of the suffering in the world, seeing all this war, poverty, destruction, people dying everywhere all the time, greed, systemic racism, like you name it. And I was like, who am I to be in this world? Like, I felt so helpless that I'm just one person and I couldn't change anything. But then
Mhm.
these texts, they talk about how suffering is part of the human condition and that in order to overcome suffering, you have to understand the nature of it. And it's something that resonates across all cultures. And that started this path of trying to understand other common things because I'm the type of person where I don't want to trust something unless I see it multiple times in different languages, I guess you could say, like
Mhm.
verbalized in multiple different ways. And then I'm like, okay, there's a kernel of truth there, because somebody over here is saying one thing, somebody over there is saying another thing, and they coexist together. And so what I discovered is that all of our religions across the world, they have very, very, very similar things. The first thing is meditation, prayer. That's the second thing. And the third thing is some sort of ritual or worship.
Mm.
So then I started thinking, okay, well, why is it that they developed in so many different ways? And why is it that they seem so different on the outside? Um, and so the more I started researching, I started recognizing that Gnosis is basically like the identification of truth within your soul that resonates with what could be considered objective truth. Recognizing awakening, that spiritual inner knowingness, that's
Yeah.
Gnosis. And I discovered that across the world, there's three different ways that humans have been able to achieve that. And the first one is experiential, which is the one that you and I experienced, the ceremony, animism, living in a world where everything is spirit, everything can be honored, everything can be cherished, dance, music, drums, sacred fire, worshiping the elements, the sacred directions, all of the earth based religions in general. It's not just limited to the indigenous Americas, it's also any other earth based religion across the world, including in the Philippines, in Africa, like all of the different, even Siberian shamanism, like these are all experiential forms of gnosis, which is to say that your spiritual awakening and the churning of spiritual awareness and insight is generated by direct interaction with the divine, where you actually feel it within you, and you don't define it, you don't like actively like work with it in any sort of way, like you are just a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Because in ceremony we often see, people who might have been atheist before come out of it and be like, oh, maybe there is God. And why is that? It's because they have a direct link to this idea of faith, this idea of like an inner standing of the divine. So that's the experiential pillar. And then we have the alchemical pillar. So the alchemical pillar is the hermeticists, the alchemists, the magicians, Aleister Crowley, tarot cards, astrology, and the alchemical pillar of divination seeks to define the nature of the divine. It seeks to understand the symbolism, the language, and the symbology of the nature of the divine to extract information from it, to then transmutate it from one form to another.
Yeah.
And so that's an active working with, and not just coexisting with it, but actually like churning it, moving it, like working with it, and also understanding cycles and the nature of our reality, which is a large part of what informs our science of today, because astronomy, astrology is one of the most ancient sciences. Ever since humans needed to understand what's going on with the cosmos when the floods occur on the river that gives us fertile soil for us to plant our seeds. We needed to track the constellations and the path of the sun and the path of the moon to understand how to actually work with the earth. And so that has translated then to physics, mathematics, um, chemistry, right? And that's one of the reasons why also it's such a predominant mindset in Western culture, because the alchemical tradition and of Gnosis, the alchemical pillar of Gnosis, was the foundation of Western thought in the Renaissance as well, since a lot of the Renaissance was as a result of the rediscovery of Hellenistic texts. So,
Hey, it's Konstantin here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode.
a lot of the alchemical pillar, it has to do with also magical rites and ceremony. And you'll see that across the pillars, there are always consistent factors. Like I said, meditation, prayer, ritual. So all of them have some form of that. It's just what purpose, to what end, and how does it help inform that inner knowingness. So that is kind of like European, Northern Africa, Greece, like the Middle East, that sort of area of the world. And then we have the transcendental pillar. And the transcendental pillar is all of the Eastern religions. So Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, excuse me, Shinto. So all of these Eastern philosophies are under the transcendental pillar because the transcendental pillar is more about actually understanding the mechanics of the energetic form. So, where you're experiencing the energetic form in the experiential pillar, you're actively using your energetic form to transmutate and create magic with the alchemical. In the transcendental pillar, you're training your energetic form to ascend higher. So, I kind of see it as like the experiential pillar is here on earth, often to do with the underworld. The alchemical pillar has more to do with the middle world, and the transcendental pillar has more to do with the upper world, like actually communicating with the divine through
Mhm.
your personal channel. And it is very similar to experiential, but I think the most important difference is the means by which it's obtained. Like the experiential pillar is more ecstatic, it's celebratory, it's more about community and cherishing the spirits of the land. Whereas with the transcendental pillar, it's very much about solitude and working only with yourself and with your inner soul, your atma, and your own channel, cultivating brilliance in your mind and your body through the practices of yoga, meditation. And so the transcendental pillar is like almost like, you know, actually becoming the divine rather than just experiencing it.
Hmm.
So those
That's,
are the three pillars.
well, thank you for explaining that. Yeah, that's. I mean, I've heard of all of them separately. I've studied some of it myself, and now I understand how you brought them all together. I love that. And it reminds me of so many things I've been shown in my meditations and shamanic journeys. I'm like, huh, as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, I know that, and I've seen that, and I've experienced that. That's pretty cool. Okay, now you said that using these, right, you can find the tools and practices to heal a very existential fear in the world today. Now, when we talk about, and you can go in whichever direction you want, but what came up for me right away is, okay, we're talking about using this to now help heal an existential fear. What's that existential fear, first of all?
Yeah, the existential fear, um, everything I do comes from my own experience. And like I was mentioning before, we have a lot of crazy shit happening in the world. Like
Yep.
so much suffering. Humans are still at war with each other. We still harm each other in the most cruel possible ways. And there's still so much greed in the world. And what does that do to a race, a species that is so highly sensitive to energy? We're electromagnetic. We are a part of the universe, as I'm sure you're familiar with your own personal experiences, like we are so much more than what we are now. And so there's a disconnect. There's like this dissonance where like every single person on earth has some sort of awareness of there being something more.
Yes.
And that's why we've spent thousands of years trying to define it. You know, that's why we have so many ancient texts and yogis who spend most of their lives sitting alone on the mountain meditating, and why we have vision quests and why we have the magicians. Like, there's that yearning, like this curiosity and desire to like uncover some form of inner truth and a connection to something so much deeper than just what we see on the material. And our world as it is now, the systems that are in place, they aren't conducive to learning that. You know, we live in a very materialistic society. We live
Yes.
in a society that prioritizes profit. We live in a society that prioritizes power, money, you know, and it's really taken a toll on our spiritual development as a species, because we need faith. We need it. And some people have a lot of stickiness around the idea of faith because, as I think it was Nietzsche who said, God is dead. You know, that's been a predominant philosophical idea for so many years, that we need to find a way to reconcile with this inner curiosity and desire to uncover something deeper with some of the incredible advancements that we've made in the material world. Science, you know, science and spirituality coexist.
Yeah.
Like, there, you can't have one without the other, because science is just like the ancient texts of yore. Science is another language to describe the nature of the universe. You could even argue the Big Bang is a creation myth. And so this is just another way of understanding yourself within the context of the universe. And I would say even atheists have faith because they believe in the Big Bang. They have faith in a creation myth of this universe, and that helps them to somehow orientate themselves within the space that they're in to create some sort of framework or structure in their minds to fall back on when things get hard. And that's the crisis of that's the existential crisis, right? When you don't have a framework to fall back on, when things are going chaotic all around you, your life is falling apart, people are dying, you know, whatever is going on in your life, you're depressed, you're anxious, whatever. Like, if you don't have some sort of framework in your mind to think, okay, well, everything is happening for me, or I have the power to change my circumstances, or whatever, insert language here, right? Like, some people think, you know, God gives me what God doesn't give me more than what I can handle. You know, that's something the Christians say. Whatever it is, like, you need that framework. And so I really seek to try to open people's minds to the different possible narratives and frameworks of faith that can help them create that framework within their minds to fall back on. Because, at least for me, I draw from many different religions. I've never really subscribed to any one, but that's just me. But maybe somebody is like, all right, you know, the ayahuasca shamans have something going. Like, I think I'm gonna go on the red road and, you know, pursue that path of the heart, because that's the language that resonates with me the most. Or I'm gonna go to an ashram and learn from uh, yoga avatar Babaji, you know, and follow the yoga path through the self realization fellowship or whatever, because that's the language that resonates with me. Or to create an amalgam like I did. And I think that's what's so powerful and so attractive about healing modalities, you know, because they answer questions that every single person has deep, deep inside of them.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree with that. And what came up to me as you're talking about that is you see a lot in this space, right? Like where you and I met in Ecuador. And a lot of the people that were there, including us to some degree as well, it's like you find yourself searching and searching and searching. So there is a big group of people in this space of personal development, spirituality, that jump from modalities to modalities. Right? It's like, oh, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to try that, and I'm going to try this. I'm curious to see what you found, because you've been on a similar path of like understanding more and more. It's like how much of it comes from the materialist side of things, is like a quick fix. Maybe this will fix. Maybe this will fix. Versus like a desire to actually find that framework for yourself. Because I feel like they're interconnected, but yet most probably don't even see that the search is actually for that framework, for that whatever it is in their heart that they want to understand or fall back on.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation actually. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like the idea of externalizing your power. Um,
Yeah.
because I think when people jump from place to place, they're like, oh, this person doesn't have the answer, therefore I'm going to move on to the next thing. So for people who do that, I think that they are still searching for something, but they're too impatient to land on something because so much of our culture has been a convenience based commodity, especially in the West. It's a lot less so in other countries, especially in the South Americas or countries that have been particularly um, brutalized by colonialism. Like there's a much different mindset there. But the Western mentality is about convenience. How fast can I get my result? And if I pay a lot of money, that means it's valuable.
Yes.
And see, I think, especially we see that with the ayahuasca circles that have been popping up over the past decade. We're seeing a lot more of these like really luxurious retreats. And even the one that we went to, it caters toward the mental mindset of the Western ideals more than anything. But traditionally speaking, like your hand is not held. Like there are no volunteers to take you to the bathroom. Nobody's changing your bucket. You're alone in the jungle, and the shamans will sing songs and hold the space for you, but you are on your own. You got to take care of yourself. You got to figure it out while you're tripping balls.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what I think we need to call back is that grit, and this idea of integrity, right? Like what these traditions across the board really build is this idea of integrity that we have really lost in this commodity based culture and the material structures. And integrity, well, what is that? Well, it's the willingness to persist even when things don't seem like they're working out for you. And for me personally, I like to spend at least a year trying something new before I call it quits and say, oh, that's not for me. Instead of, 3 days, like there are ayahuasca circles in the United States that are like 2 days long, and maybe somebody goes there and they're like, it didn't do anything for me. I didn't
Yeah.
have any visuals. And it's like, okay, first of all, ayahuasca doesn't work like that. Like, it's not about the visuals. That's a whole other conversation. But also, it's 2 days. Like, that's not nearly enough time to build a relationship with a stranger. The plants are spirits that you build a relationship with. That's the experiential pillar of Gnosis. You actually have to communicate with these plants and actually establish some sort of rhythm with them to help them understand you and for you to understand them. It's a relationship. And it takes time to cultivate that. And so, this impatience, I think, is something that we're starting to come out of. I've noticed in the spiritual community, more people are willing to trust the process. Does that answer your question?
Oh, I mean, it answers many questions, but it answers the main question too, right? And I love a lot of the things you said, and I want to come back to a couple of them. The integrity one for sure, the impatience one as well. But before we even go there, like going back to our time together, right? I think you were the 12 days as well. Were you 12 days or?
Yeah, I was
Yeah, I
12.
was 12 days. And what blew me away is that, I mean, I want to say 38 at the time. And I had never been part of a community like that where it's like I meet strangers and over 12 days it becomes such a strong bond. I mean, of course, you and I have talked on and off, but like I some people I stay in touch with weekly and some are really close friends. And I'm like, how is that possible? And then to tie it to something you said, and that's I guess where my question goes or my thoughts go, is this idea of trying to make everything easier for people, right? Like you have volunteers to take you to the bathroom or take your buckets, and I feel like deep down inside there's a balance there where, like, yes, there's the power in sitting alone and going through it alone, and then also the power of community that can help you through that. And I feel that there is room for both of them, but we push more towards one more than the other in this type of retreats and in this type of experiences, where like the more westernized they become, the more like everything your hand is held the entire time, so then it doesn't really give you time to do any of your inner work and sit with that. At least that's how I see it, because even with the retreat we went to, like, what was really interesting that the inner work or the hard work began after, but there was no guidance on how that after would start. And at least with all the people I kept in touch, I mean, nobody had a good time integrating because there was no guidance. So I wonder, there has to be a balance, in my opinion, balance, harmony, where it's like, yes, there's a lot of inner stuff to be done, but there's also the power in the collective and in sitting with like-minded individuals and going through these experiences, be it the actual experience itself or the integration of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what I really enjoy about the idea of the middle path, right? Like, and we see that in the Rosicrucian traditions. I I forget what the other polarity is called, but there's Lucifer, and then there's this other guy, and then there's Christ in the middle. And the point is that Lucifer isn't evil, he's just the overindulgence of the divine, and then this other aspect of, imbalance represents the overindulgence in the material, where Christ represents the equal balance of the two. So speaking to what you're saying, like going through something alone and then having the balance of community, like there's definitely a middle path there where I've really found that actually on the Red Road with the vision quests, because you really see what it takes to be a part of a community that's actually building something that's extraordinarily beautiful. Um, Zurich Pamba, where I sat on the mountain, um, there's a sacred fire there. It's called the Sacred Fire of Ischitalan, that's been burning for the past 15 years straight. So there are fire keepers there that keep it burning day and night, put it into a shelter when it rains, etc. And they hold sun dances there. And they also hold moon dances. And they hold all sorts of ceremony and
Mhm.
ritual where people come together to celebrate certain cycles of life, or um, certain rites of passage, or they celebrate the sun or they celebrate the moon, right? Like, and it's a community gathering where they drink the medicine too. um, but at the same time, that very same place, that very same fire, it carries the container for the vision questers who sit alone on the mountain with themselves and their thoughts and nothing but the clothes on their back. No food, no water, no talking, no touching. So I find that it's important to discover that balance within yourself, like especially with psychedelic integration. um, there's a reason that the retreat center that we went to doesn't carry on the integration conversation. And that is because it's so community based. It's almost like the inverse, where it's like you have all this community, you have all of this time, but then when you're out in the world, now it's your time to sit with yourself and see what you've actually learned. Like something one of the elders of that community says is, you find out if you're really enlightened when you come back down from the mountain and live with your family for a couple months.
Yeah.
And so you know, it is important. And I think that's where sometimes people get really stuck, because, our retreat center in particular had some, I guess, mixed mixed things. I don't want to get into it, but
Of
some
course.
people came out disgruntled, right?
They did, yes.
And I, no shame to them. It's their experience. I honor and respect that. I also believe that it's part of the healing work that they need to do. It's like, maybe all of the beauty and magic of the plants has cultivated this particular experience for them to have in order to grow past it and overcome it, because maybe that experience of their integration is what they needed to overcome the limiting beliefs that they came with originally. And if they stay in that disgruntled attitude, then they're not learning what they needed to learn, and they're staying stubborn. And that might seem harsh, I don't know, but it goes back to that idea of self responsibility, right? Because if you continue to be in a victim mindset and to say, like I was hurt, I let me say, somebody, you hurt me, like,
Mhm.
Bogdan, you hurt me so bad. It's like, okay, well, maybe you did. That is true. Like that is something that can be true. But let's live in a paradox, right? Like, let's live in a dialectic of things that can be true, right? Like, you can hurt me, but I can also say, even though you hurt me, you are the greatest gift of my life because you taught me a lesson. And that's when you can step out of that victim narrative and take back your power and say, all right, well, I'm the creator of my experience. And even though, like, this person didn't quite align with what I needed, or maybe the energy of the ceremony wasn't aligned with like what I want to see in ceremony or whatever. It's like, okay, well, great. Now I know. And I can move on to a different circle if I so desire. Like, it doesn't have to be more than that. Because otherwise, you start digging into the stubbornness and start developing these negative perceptions, and then you start blaming, and then you start, like, creating an avatar of like all of your pain outside of yourself. And what good does that do anybody? It only continues to, like, feed into the narrative of suffering in the world.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, what I'm hearing you talk about as well, there are two things that I've had to dance with quite a bit. The idea of expectations, right? Going in and be like, okay, well, I want my outcome to look a certain way. And there were many people in that retreat that we did where after the first ceremony, they had no experience. And there was a lot of doubt, right? Because they expected the visuals you were talking about earlier and other things that didn't happen. And then those that stuck around, because not everyone did, had a magical experience a second or third time. And they're like, oh my God, this is what I wanted, right? So it goes back to that expectation piece. And what goes hand in hand with that, in my opinion, is a trust. I trust in the process. Okay, I've come here to have an experience, whatever it is, and trusting that whatever is meant to happen for me is going to happen. And that's such a fine line to walk because it's so easy to fall into the expectation piece without even realizing through your stories of your past and programs and whatever that you can start into that blame, shame, guilt game where you're like, man, but look at Masha. She has such a great experience. Why can't I have that?
Yeah.
Right. And that's I mean, I was there too in some parts, to be honest, because trust has been the story of the last, I guess, I don't know, it's been 28, 30 months almost since we've been there. And it's been a lesson in that over and over. And it's getting better and better because the more you trust, in other words, getting out of your own way, the more things unfold. And it's just magical to witness.
Truly. Yeah, it is truly magical to witness. And um what came to my mind, there's this book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer.
I've heard of that.
um Fantastic book. And I believe it's in this book, but there's this piece of wisdom that has really stuck with me over the past year or so, and that is, everything is for you, but nothing is yours. Or you can put it also, everything is for me, but nothing is mine. And I just find so much wisdom in this. I always come back to it because it also reminds me of like the Buddhist ideas of attachment, right? Because attachment really confused me when I first learned about it. I was like, well, don't we need to be attached? Like, otherwise, like, we're just untethered, like we have to like love,
Yeah.
we have to, but the point of attachment and the idea of not being attached is more so about what the Bhagavad Gita talks about, which is you are not entitled to the fruits of your labors. So, in other words, you don't give love expecting to receive it back. That would be conditional. And that's a form of attachment. You give love because you are love, because you are being of love, and you just seek to spill the cup that overfloweth of your love to others, you know? And that can apply to anything. And to go back to this idea of everything is for me, but nothing is mine, the expectation of the outcome, number one, is an attachment to the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And then that colors the experience and creates all of those negative perceptions that can come out of it, and also externalizes your power. So it's like, oh, I wasn't healed after the first cup. I expected this to be a magic pill. Well, sorry, but like, it doesn't work like that. Like, and to have the adaptability of mind, because also that magic pill, the idea of this magic pill, right, that means it's something that's yours, right? You're trying to take it. Whereas if everything is for you and nothing is yours, then every experience that you have, every cup of ayahuasca you drink, is for you. It gives you everything that you could possibly need. And like you said, to trust that is probably the most terrifying thing ever. Also, going along with the idea of vulnerability, right? Because to just let yourself, I don't know, like if anybody here has had like an ego death during one of their psychedelic experiences, it's fucking horrifying. And like, you know, just, people don't like that. It's uncomfortable. But when you surrender that and allow it to happen, that's when you come out the other side and recognize I didn't have to be scared of that at all. That the universe is love, that everything around me is working for me, just like it's working for the cat in your house or for the trees in the woods, the mycelium network, which provides it the nutrients that it needs and the neural activity to communicate between other trees. You see evidence of this everywhere in the perfect symmetry of our earth. So we operate within that spectrum. And I think we start to get a little too cerebral with it, especially when we don't have that element of faith. Like, it all comes back to faith. There is magic in the world if you choose to see it, and it doesn't have to
Yes.
be like Harry Potter magic. It doesn't have to be, like people levitating in the sky. It can literally just be, oh my God, like that leaf, the veins of that leaf look like the veins in my hands. That's so cool. And it doesn't have to be anything more than a simple observation.
Yeah, I mean, what's the definition of that, right? Like, because of, I guess, social media, we have a distorted view of that. And you talked about the magic pill, and I kind of want to go back to that because it reminds me of the first ceremony we had in Ecuador, because it was the magic pill or a magic pill for quite a few people that I still remember some stories. I'm like, man, that was magical. And that sets the tone then for others, like, well, I didn't have a magic pill. Like, what's wrong with me? Or, why does God love me less? Or all those stories that come up. But what also came up for me is like, yes, that ceremony may have been the magic pill for them, but you have no idea what it took to get there. Like all the other healing and work. And maybe, maybe that's all they needed. And it's so interesting to see how, to me, expectations, at least, and I see it from my own life, because as much as I work on the trust and allow trust to come in, expectations still kind of sneak in on outcomes. They're always based on someone else's story. Because you saw something and then it created a story, and you don't realize it might have been when you're 2 years old. And I have an expectation of how, like a money story, for example, it's like, oh, money is hard to come by, or money is evil. I mean, that's not your story. You found a story, and now it's your lens through which you see life, and then it's going to impact how you're going to see this magic appear around you, right? Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because, you know, everybody around us is a mirror. And we ourselves are mirrors for the people around us. We're an inherently community based species. And it's important for us to see the reflection of our own desires in others. Because ultimately, like the reason why we create those narratives, at least what I've discovered within myself, is that when I project envy or jealousy or something like that on somebody else, it's because I want what they have. And when I project jealousy or envy, that's another form of giving away my power, where it's like, oh, I'm jealous out of a feeling of lack or scarcity,
Hmm.
which means I don't have the thing that I want. Therefore, it gives the opportunity for all my limiting beliefs around that to justify that and to say, you can never have that or whatever. But then it's a matter of reframing the perspective, right? If everything is for you and nothing is yours, what if my jealousy is a portal to help me understand the ways I can achieve the things that I desire? It was actually a really big thing that I went through this year when I was living in Ecuador for 6 months, and I actually volunteered at the retreat center that we went
Okay.
to. Um, and a really big thing for me this year has been relationships, and my abandonment wounds around intimacy. And I specifically went in, to focus on those things. And a big thing came up where there was a couple that runs ceremonies there now, and they are just the most magnificent, beautiful couple. Like the way the man looks at the woman, he absolutely adores her. And he has so many beautiful things to say to her. And she, in turn, absolutely cherishes him. And they have just this really beautiful, pure love for each other. And you can really see it and feel it, especially when they're carrying ceremony. And maybe you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think they were there for 2 years, 2.5 years ago, right?
Yeah, they were, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay, I know who you're talking about. But go
Okay.
ahead.
So, um, I found myself during a San Pedro ceremony feeling a deep envy. I was like, they they're so cute. I just want to like, you know, and this feeling of like, almost hatefulness, which was really like, feeling anger and hatefulness and stuff. I feel that as much as I feel love and gratitude. So it's always so scary to like grapple with it.
Yeah.
So I was feeling this hatefulness, and then I had to say, like, okay, Masha, like, what is this teaching you? And it made me realize, like, oh, I want a man that looks at me like that, which means that I need to take a look at myself and see, why am I not attracting a man that looks at me like that? Why am I not putting myself in situations where a man like that could be there? And that turned into a whole series of self reflections on all of the different ways that I devalued myself and didn't love myself, and, created limiting beliefs around who I deserve, what I deserve. And actually, just a few weeks ago, I met a very incredible man who just popped out of the sky. I don't know how this happened or why, but like
Oh, you do. You do.
it's
You
just
do
it's
know.
a okay, maybe I do, but it's just so mind-boggling to me. Like I did all of this inner work. I finally decided I'm okay being alone. I literally told my friends, like, you know what? If I'm single for like 5 years, okay, I'm fine. And as soon as I like was concrete and fully sure of that detachment, here comes this man into my life. And so that's the thing, applied to relationships, applied to money, applied to your business, applied to whatever it is you want in your life. Like as soon as you start to recognize that your emotions are communicating with you, it's your body that is telling you and guiding you. It's your higher self that is expressing itself and interacting with all of the minutia of all of the electromagnetic energy all around you to guide you into what it is that you truly desire, to guide you into what it is that your soul wants,
Yes.
because your soul came here with a specific purpose to have a specific experience. And the more that we trust that guidance, and instead of getting sucked into the narratives of the negativity, getting sucked into the narratives of the toxic positivity, when we find that middle path of curiosity, exploration, wanting to just like, because magic is curiosity, and just wanting to experience and asking why, that's when the magic starts to really happen.
Yeah, I love that example so much. Thank you for being vulnerable and going there. Because as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, that's just mirroring how you feel on the inside, right? It's like,
Yeah.
why is it teaching? That's a hard lesson because I'm going through a lot of those things myself. It's like, if a relationship is not up to my standards, and funny enough, here's something I discovered, Masha, and I'm sure you've seen this too, and you probably agree. Your relationship with everything, like I'm looking at you through a monitor right now. That's tied to a computer. That's tied to the internet, to the power source. If power goes out, I get pissed off. So I have a relationship with power, right? With the actual electricity, I mean.
Yeah.
If my monitor dies all of a sudden, there's a relationship there, even though we don't realize it, right? Like you're in relationship with everything. Money is another great example. So like if something reflects back without even you realizing it, it doesn't mean it's not there. You can still, take a step back, like you said, and take a look and say, well, what's this trying to show me? And when you realize it in the moment, and Saint Pedro helped you see that, I would imagine, you're like, oh, okay, I gotta look at something deeper here. And that's what you could say the scary work begins, but it's actually not as scary once you go in, at least from my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's always like the anticipation of things being hard. Cuz like I don't know, at least for me, like I've been taught that you have to work hard and
Yep.
like you have to suffer and like life is about suffering. But ever since, my time with the medicines, I'm like, actually life is supposed to be joyous. Like we're meant to smile and have fun and have pleasure, and that like purpose is pleasure, that's the dance, that's the rasa lila of existence, the divine dance. And it's it can be scary, but the more you trust it and the more you ask the why, like you said, like what is this teaching me, what am I learning from this? Everything is for me, but nothing is mine. It's like it just creates a whole new perspective.
And I know I love the quote you referred to it a few times now, and literally as you said that one thing came up for me. It's like, look at how much empowerment there is in this idea of everything is for me but nothing is mine, because if nothing is yours, you don't have to worry about protecting it and keeping it away from others and worrying what, which direction it may go in. It's just, now, I mean, how you put it in practice, that's a different story, right? But it feels very empowering in a sense, and it's like it's giving you all the power back, and it's like, yeah, I mean, if I don't have to worry about anything, it's just okay, I can continue on with my life, and I know that if this thing is taken away from me, that's okay. The next thing will
Yeah,
come up.
exactly. Yeah, it carries that cyclical importance of things, like the death and rebirth cycles that are inherent to everything in the material world, right? And something in astrology, there's the Taurus Scorpio axis in astrology. Scorpio represents death, rebirth, transformation, and Taurus represents abundance and material luxury. And so, what happens when things die? Well, it becomes the detritus with which the earth becomes fertile for beautiful new things to grow. And so, having that detachment from the process and just letting things happen, you can just look outside and see the old growth forests being a perfect example of exactly what you just said, that like even if I don't have to protect it, right? I don't have to protect it. I don't have to hang on to it and cling to it, because it will naturally evolve into something far more beautiful than I could have ever imagined.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I love that, Masha. Well, I mean, we could be talking forever here, and I love where the conversation went. So, before I let you go for this time, and I'm sure you'll be back, what's coming up for you? Maybe one thing that we haven't talked about, anything to share with anyone listening right now?
Well, I'm a bit nervous, but I am building a program, and it is going to be on the three pillars of Gnosis. And it's going to be a 9-week program where we go through each pillar for 3 weeks. And I'm going to talk about practical tools that come from each of those pillars. We're going to put them in practice, in ceremony. Um, and also, we're going to have calls with, all of the theoretical, cool, magical stuff that we want to talk about, integration circles and stuff, talking about psychedelics and psychedelic integration, of course, because I specifically cater to psychonauts and people who have had mystical experiences. So I am currently in the process of working on that. I don't have a launch date yet, but I'm really excited to just share it
Yes,
because
put it out there in the universe, right? Like, step into your truth. I love that, Masha, so much, and we'll support you here as well. Once you have the give us the details, we'll put them in the show notes. And in the meantime, of course, we'll have in the show notes so people can find you and can hear you talk some more. And this was such a pleasure.
thank you. Thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate our conversation.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate you, your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Unleash Thyself Today, TikTok and YouTube at Unleash Thyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose with purpose. See you in the next episode.